When Olivia and I met during our freshman year of college, it felt like fate. We were both driven, ambitious, and in love with the idea of building a future together. Our relationship was built on shared dreams and goals, the promise of something solid and lasting. We were inseparable, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about her. By the time we graduated, we were already talking about getting married, starting a family. We had a vision for our life. Quiet weekends spent in Charleston, family vacations, evenings spent in our cozy living room, and lazy Sunday mornings with our kids. It was a typical dream, one that many couples share. I was a financial consultant at a reputable firm, and Olivia had worked her way up to become a marketing director at a company she loved. We had 2 children, a son, Noah, who was now in middle school, and our daughter, Emma, in elementary school. On the surface, we had it all. A house we were proud of, a thriving career for both of us, and a beautiful family that seemed to be living the American dream. People looked at us and thought we were the perfect couple. I believed it too. But things started to change, subtly at first. It was easy to overlook, to brush off as just the natural ebb and flow of life. Olivia started spending more time on her phone, not in the casual way she used to, checking messages, browsing social media, or watching videos. No, it was different this time. She would glance at her phone with a kind of anxiety, quickly swiping it away if I entered the room. If she had a call, she'd take it in private, even though we'd always been open with each other about everything. I tried to dismiss it at first. Work stress, I thought. Or maybe it was just the demands of family life. But over time, my suspicions grew. She was more secretive, more distant. When we were out together, her attention seemed to be elsewhere. There was a certain edge to her behavior, a detachment that hadn't been there before. One evening after a long day at work, I tried to get her to open up. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the kids were already in bed, and the house was quiet. I asked her gently if anything was wrong. She reassured me that everything was fine. "It's just work, Jason," she said, giving me a faint smile. But I saw the flicker of something in her eyes, something that wasn't quite right. I pushed the thought away. After all, we had been through so much together. College, career challenges, the birth of our children. We had always found our way back to each other. It seemed impossible that anything could come between us. But as days turned into weeks, the small signs continued to pile up. She started spending longer hours at the office more than usual. I started wondering if her workload had really increased, or if something else was occupying her mind. She was still the same Olivia in many ways, the same loving mother, the same dedicated professional. But there was an emotional distance that was slowly taking root. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't help it. A nagging feeling kept pulling at me, telling me that something had changed. One evening, I had a moment of clarity. I had just finished a long meeting with a client and came home later than usual. I found Olivia sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone. She didn't look up when I entered the room, and that bothered me. It was a small thing, but something about it made my skin crawl. I asked her if she wanted to go for a walk, but she gave a vague answer, telling me she was tired. That night, after she went to bed, I lay awake in the dark. The feeling of unease grew stronger. I had never felt this way before. There had always been a deep trust between us, but now it felt like it was crumbling bit by bit. I thought about checking her phone. It was a thought that had crossed my mind a few times, but I had always pushed it away. We had always been open about our phones, but tonight, something inside me snapped. I had to know what was going on. I reached for her phone on the nightstand, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to betray her trust, but my mind was spinning with questions. Was I overreacting? Or was there something I needed to see? As I scrolled through her messages, I found nothing that immediately stood out. But then I saw it, an email thread, buried deep in her inbox, with a name I didn't recognize. It was a man, someone from her work. The exchange wasn't overtly inappropriate, but there was something about the tone of it that made my stomach churn. I didn't know what to think. I put the phone down quickly, as if the evidence would disappear if I stopped looking. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow. The next day I tried to brush it off. I didn't confront Olivia. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I had misinterpreted things. But deep down I knew something had changed. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was starting to lose her. The small changes that had started to unsettle me now seemed to grow more pronounced. Olivia's behavior wasn't just slightly off. It was like a crack in the foundation that we had built together, one that I couldn't ignore anymore. She had always been open with me, but now the distance between us was becoming undeniable. It wasn't just the way she clutched her phone when I entered the room, quickly turning it away as though she was hiding something. It was the way she kept looking at it in those quiet moments. Whenever we were having dinner or relaxing together, I'd catch her glancing down at her screen, a flicker of nervousness in her eyes, as if afraid I might see something she didn't want me to. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was imagining things. Life had been stressful lately, after all. Work had picked up for both of us. But there was something about the way Olivia reacted to my presence when she was on her phone that felt different. In the past, she had been carefree, no secrets between us. Now she was defensive, almost guilty. The air in our house had shifted. One night after dinner, I walked into the kitchen to get something to drink. Olivia was sitting at the table, her phone held tightly in both hands. As I approached, she looked up quickly, her eyes wide, almost startled. She tried to hide the screen, but not fast enough. It was a text message from someone I didn't recognize. I couldn't make out the entire message, but the tone was too familiar, too intimate. A simple, "Can't wait to see you this weekend," followed by a string of emojis that felt strangely personal. I froze, the glass in my hand suddenly feeling heavier. My mind raced, but I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Instead, I watched her for a moment longer. Olivia smiled weakly as if nothing had happened and tried to pass it off as no big deal. "It's just a colleague, Jason," she said, her voice a little too defensive. "We're planning a work thing. You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was. She had never acted like this before, so guarded and defensive. There was no denying it now. The unease in me had turned into something sharper, more urgent. For the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Olivia still seemed like the woman I had married, but there was an emotional wall between us now. She no longer spoke to me about her day as she used to. The late nights, the longer hours at work, it all made sense now. But what didn't make sense was why she felt the need to hide things from me. The more I tried to push the thoughts from my mind, the more they gnawed at me. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I decided to ask her directly. I needed to know. My gut was telling me to confront her, to force the truth out into the open. "Olivia," I started, my voice calm but carrying a weight I hadn't meant to show. "Is there something going on? Is there someone else?" She froze for a moment, her hand still holding her wine glass. Her eyes darted to the side, a subtle reaction but enough to send a chill down my spine. Then almost immediately she put on a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "What are you talking about, Jason?" she asked, the tone far too casual, as if the question didn't deserve a serious answer. "I'm just stressed with work. I've told you that." Her words didn't convince me. The answer felt rehearsed, too smooth, as if she was trying to sell me a lie I wasn't willing to buy anymore. But I didn't push it further, not yet. I was still trying to make sense of it all. I had no real proof, just a feeling, and the feeling was growing louder with each passing day. The next morning I decided to take a more subtle approach. I was determined to find the truth, but I didn't want to let on how much it was affecting me. I waited for her to leave for work, as I usually did, but this time I couldn't resist. I picked up her phone, the temptation too strong to ignore. She had left it on the kitchen counter, unlocked. I hesitated for a moment, but then my curiosity took over. I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding with each swipe. There were a few work-related texts, but then I found something that made my blood run cold. A message thread between Olivia and the same man whose name I'd seen before. The tone of their conversation was intimate, flirtatious, with references to private meetings and more. They were making plans for a hotel room, for a weekend away. I quickly put the phone down, my hands trembling. I felt like I'd just uncovered something I wasn't ready to face. I had hoped I was wrong, that I was overreacting, but the evidence was staring me in the face. I wanted to confront her then and there, but I couldn't bring myself to. I needed time to process it, to figure out what to do next. I couldn't understand why Olivia had gone down this path, why she would betray me like this after all we had built together. But as the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living with a stranger. The distance between us grew, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more the doubt festered inside me. I felt like I was losing her. And worse yet, I was losing the person I thought I knew better than anyone. The unease that had been simmering beneath the surface over the past few weeks was now impossible to ignore. Olivia's behavior had shifted so dramatically that I couldn't rationalize it away anymore. I could no longer pretend that the subtle changes weren't pointing toward something I wasn't ready to face. The first sign of trouble had been her increased protectiveness over her phone. It had started innocuously, nothing that would have immediately raised any red flags. She had always been careful with her devices, but I'd never thought twice about it. After all, we had been together for so long, and we had always trusted each other completely. But now it felt different. I began to notice the way she would clutch her phone when I entered the room, turning the screen away or quickly putting it down, as if trying to hide something. It wasn't just occasional, it was constant. At first I chalked it up to stress, to the pressures of work and home life. But as the days went on, the patterns didn't fade. They grew more pronounced. She even started taking her phone into the bathroom when she showered. That was something I had never seen her do before. It wasn't just about the phone. Olivia's moods had become more unpredictable. One moment she would be warm and affectionate, as though nothing had changed. The next she would withdraw, almost as though she was protecting a secret that she couldn't, or wouldn't, share with me. I didn't know if I was being paranoid, or if there was something more going on. But every time I saw her glance at her phone or look away when I asked simple questions, a deep knot formed in my stomach. The tension in the house was palpable. The small moments that once brought us closer now felt distant. I couldn't help but wonder if I had become invisible to her, or worse, if I was losing her to someone else. One evening after dinner, she went to the kitchen to make tea, leaving her phone on the couch. I couldn't believe what I was about to do, but I couldn't help it. The pull to know what was happening behind that screen had become too strong. I told myself it was just a look, just a moment to ease the gnawing doubt that was eating away at me. I picked up the phone carefully, trying not to make a sound. My heart was racing as I unlocked it, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through her messages. The first few were harmless enough. Texts with friends, work-related conversations, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I stumbled upon something that made my breath catch in my throat. There it was, a message thread with a name I didn't recognize. The messages were dated just a few days ago. The tone of their conversation was flirtatious, too intimate for colleagues. He had sent her a message that made my blood run cold. "I can't wait to see you again. We'll make it unforgettable." I stopped breathing. I could feel the blood rushing to my head, the room suddenly feeling too small, too tight. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This wasn't just a friendly exchange. It was something deeper, something far more personal. My first instinct was to put the phone down, to close it all out. But I couldn't. I had to know. I scrolled further, my fingers moving mechanically, as if on autopilot. The next message was even worse. It was from her, responding to his invitation. She had written, "I'll be thinking of you. Let's make this the best weekend yet." That was it. There was no denying it now. I had found the proof I was looking for. My heart was pounding in my chest as I placed the phone back on the couch. The weight of what I had just discovered crushed me. I could feel the room spinning around me. The disbelief, the shock, the overwhelming sense of betrayal, everything was crashing down at once. I had to confront her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it just yet. What was I supposed to say? How could I even begin to process what was happening? It was like I had been living in a lie for months, and now the truth had hit me like a freight train. I waited for Olivia to come back, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. I had to face her, but the thought of confronting her, of tearing apart the fragile facade we had built, terrified me. When she walked back into the room, I acted like nothing was wrong. Though my heart was beating so loudly in my chest, I was sure she could hear it. She smiled at me, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, but I said nothing. I couldn't. That night, as we went to bed, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I couldn't sleep, not with the weight of what I had discovered hanging over me. The man in those messages, who was he to her? Was it just an affair of the mind, or had things gone even further? I tried to block it out, to ignore the doubt clawing at me, but I couldn't. I needed answers. I needed the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. The weight of the discoveries I had made over the past few days had begun to settle like a fog in my mind. I couldn't deny it anymore. Olivia was hiding something, and every new clue was pushing me further away from the woman I thought I knew. I spent days wrestling with the urge to confront her, but something kept holding me back. Was it fear? Or was it simply that I wasn't ready to face the reality of what was happening? I didn't know, but one thing was certain. I could no longer ignore the signs, and I needed answers. It was a Wednesday night when it happened, the moment that would change everything. Olivia was out for a late meeting, and I found myself alone in the house, pacing through the quiet rooms as my thoughts spiraled. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't concentrate on anything except the growing pit in my stomach. I had always respected Olivia's privacy, but the boundaries between us were becoming blurred, and the walls that had once seemed so solid now felt fragile. When I entered our bedroom, I didn't even think twice before walking over to her nightstand where her phone lay charging. There was no rational explanation for why I did it, but in that moment, the temptation was too great. I picked up the phone and unlocked it, my hands shaking as I swiped through her messages and apps. But it wasn't until I opened the camera roll that I found what I wasn't prepared for. I scrolled through pictures, nothing unusual at first, until I saw a folder titled Private. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It was as if the folder was mocking me, daring me to open it. I tapped on it. What I saw next was something I never expected. It was a video. Olivia sitting in a dimly lit room, her hair disheveled, her expression intense and eager. The camera was set up on a shelf in front of her, angled just right to capture every detail of the scene. She seemed to be filming herself, and though I couldn't hear anything yet, I knew exactly what this was. An intimate recording. My stomach churned as I pressed play. The sound started softly, but it didn't take long for the reality of what I was watching to hit me like a punch in the gut. Olivia was no longer the woman I knew. Her confidence, her energy, her whole demeanor was so different from the woman I had built a life with. She was showing a side of herself that I had never seen, a side that was raw and vulnerable in a way that felt almost too intimate to witness. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stop watching, couldn't tear myself away from the screen. Her face, her expressions, everything about the video made my blood run cold. It wasn't just a private moment, it was a statement. This was something Olivia had chosen to do, something she had shared with someone else. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This wasn't about a single lapse in judgment. No, this was something deliberate. Something she had hidden from me, and possibly from herself, too. The video continued, and I saw her engage with the camera in a way that felt almost performative. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing this for someone else. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer the woman I had fallen in love with, and I had no idea who this new version of her was. I wanted to stop the video, but I couldn't. I had to keep watching, as if the answers I needed were somewhere in the flickering images before me. The whole scene played out slowly, too slowly, and I realized I was watching her engage in something much deeper than what I had imagined. She had stepped into a world that I had no access to, a world that I wasn't part of. The video ended abruptly, leaving me with 1,000 questions and a sense of betrayal that ran deeper than I could have anticipated. I felt sick. I felt hollow. My hands were still shaking as I set the phone down on the table, the weight of what I had just seen suffocating me. For a moment I sat there, motionless, as the room around me felt colder than ever. The silence was deafening. I had always trusted Olivia, but now that trust was shattered into pieces I didn't know how to put back together. I had seen the truth, but the truth was ugly. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to throw the phone in her face and demand answers, but I couldn't. I wasn't ready for the fallout. I wasn't ready for the emotional devastation that would follow. but I couldn't pretend anymore. The video had exposed something raw, something real, and it was a side of her I had never known. I knew that I couldn't continue living in denial, hoping that everything would work itself out. The reality was right in front of me, and I had to face it. Olivia returned home later that evening, and I pretended everything was normal. But inside, I was unraveling. I could barely look at her without seeing the woman in that video, the woman who had hidden herself from me and from the life we had built together. The question now wasn't whether I was ready to confront her. It was whether I was ready to lose everything I thought I knew. The room felt suffocating. The night had stretched on far too long, and despite my exhaustion, I couldn't escape the nagging pull to uncover more. The video was one thing, but it wasn't enough. It had only opened the door. I needed more, something concrete, something that would explain the growing emptiness between Olivia and me. I couldn't let this go, not now. I had been walking around in a fog, holding the weight of the truth that I wasn't ready to face. That video had shattered something inside me, but it was the smallest piece of the puzzle. I had to know everything. I couldn't keep pretending, hoping for some last shred of trust to hold on to. I needed to know how deep this went. The next morning, Olivia went off to work as usual. I didn't say much to her, no small talk, no pleasantries. I was still reeling from what I had seen the night before. I could feel her eyes on me as she left, wondering why I was so distant. But I couldn't bring myself to explain, not yet. When she was gone, I started the process that I had been dreading for days. I went back to her phone. At first I hesitated. I had already gone through it once, and I felt like I was violating something sacred. But this wasn't just about privacy anymore. It was about survival. I had to know what was going on. I couldn't live in the dark any longer. I unlocked her phone again, trying to ignore the guilt that gnawed at me. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before I started scrolling through her emails. She hadn't deleted anything, at least not yet. It was all still there, just waiting to be uncovered. And then I found it. A thread of emails buried deep in her inbox. The subject line was innocuous enough. Weekend plans. But what lay inside made my pulse quicken. The emails were from the same man I had seen her texting. He was planning a weekend getaway with her. The details were clear, dates, a hotel reservation, and even intimate language in the messages that made my stomach turn. She had been planning this all along. She wasn't just having an affair in secret, she was anticipating it, preparing for it. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt the ground slip beneath me as I read those words, seeing the plans she had made with someone who wasn't me, someone who had taken my place in her life. I could feel my chest tightening as I scrolled further. There were more details, more confirmations of their secret plans, a trip, a rendezvous, everything mapped out. It was clear that this wasn't just a mistake, a one-time lapse. This was something real, something she had put time and effort into. I closed the emails quickly as if they could suddenly disappear, but the damage was done. I sat there frozen. The silence in the house felt deafening. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than I had imagined. She had been hiding it all from me, making plans to escape from our life, from everything we had built together. For a few moments, I just sat there trying to steady my breathing. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It was everything she had hidden from me, everything she had chosen not to share. I had believed in her, trusted her, and now I was left to sift through the broken pieces of a life I thought I understood. But I still wasn't done. I needed more. This wasn't enough. I needed to know the full scope of her betrayal, to understand just how far this had gone. I knew Olivia had a Google account that synced her photos and videos, just like mine. A long time ago, we had set it up together to back up our memories, family photos, important moments. It seemed harmless at the time, but now I realized that the account could hold the key to everything. With shaky hands, I logged into her account. It felt wrong, so wrong, but I had crossed that line already. I had to keep going, to get to the bottom of it. My stomach churned as I navigated through the photos and videos. Most of it was family stuff. Pictures of the kids, holidays, random snapshots of our life. But then, I found something else. A video. It was the same video I had seen before, the one where Olivia had filmed herself. But this time, there was something else. It was a different video, one I hadn't seen. It wasn't just her this time. He was in it too. The man she had been seeing. They were both in the video, a private moment they had shared, captured on film. The intimacy between them was unmistakable, and the reality of what I was seeing hit me harder than anything else. My hands were shaking as I watched the video, as I saw them together, touching, laughing, sharing a moment that I should have been a part of. I couldn't look away. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. The pieces were falling into place. Every bit of evidence I had found pointed to the same thing. Olivia had been living a double life, and I had been blind to it. I slammed the phone down on the table, my chest heaving as I tried to breathe. The truth was suffocating. She had betrayed me in the most complete way, and now I was left with nothing but the cold, hard facts staring back at me. I had uncovered the truth, but it felt like I had lost everything. I had always prided myself on being able to handle anything life threw at me, but this was different. This was my wife, the woman I had loved and trusted, the woman who had been my partner for over a decade. How could I move forward from this? The house felt strangely quiet when Olivia returned that evening. There was a heaviness in the air, a tension that I couldn't ignore. Every footstep she made echoed in my mind, like the ticking of a clock counting down to a confrontation I wasn't ready for but knew was inevitable. I had everything, the proof, the video, the emails, but the thing that had been haunting me, that last bit of the puzzle, was the string of messages between her and him. I had seen snippets, enough to know that something was wrong, but I hadn't read everything. Not yet. Something in me had been holding back, unsure whether I wanted to truly face the full extent of what I knew. But tonight, I couldn't wait any longer. The weight in my chest had grown unbearable. I had to confront her. I couldn't live in the unknown anymore. The questions, the doubt, it had all spiraled out of control. I waited for her to settle in. She walked into the kitchen, humming lightly, too casual, as though she hadn't just shattered everything we had built. I watched her, trying to steady my breathing, feeling the rage and heartbreak simmering under my skin. She turned to me as she poured herself a drink. "Long day at work," she said, her voice soft, almost like she was trying to ease the tension between us. I wanted to scream, to throw everything in her face, but I stayed calm. I had to. "Olivia," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "we need to talk." She stopped in her tracks, glancing up at me, the smile fading from her face. She could feel it now, the shift. She could feel the distance between us growing. "About what?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but the unease in her eyes told me she knew exactly where this was headed. I didn't waste time. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the evidence staring back at me like a final blow. I opened the thread of messages, the ones I had found hidden away in her inbox. The words on the screen burned into my mind. I handed her the phone. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice cold, even though every part of me felt on fire. Olivia took the phone with a hesitant hand. I watched her face as her eyes skimmed the messages, the same ones I had seen earlier. She went pale as she read, her breath catching in her throat. At that moment I saw the truth. The wall she had built between us crumbled. She wasn't even trying to hide her reaction anymore. She was trapped, caught in her own lies. "Jason, it's not what you think," she began, her voice trembling now, no longer composed. "It's complicated." Complicated? Was this really the excuse she was going to offer? My heart hammered in my chest. It was all too much. I couldn't keep pretending that I was okay with this, that everything was fine. I interrupted her before she could go on, my voice rising with the anger I'd been holding in for too long. "How long, Olivia? How long has this been going on?" She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out at first. The silence stretched between us like an ocean, each passing second making the tension thicker. Finally, her shoulders slumped in defeat, and she whispered, "It started a few months ago. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice cracking with disbelief. "You didn't mean for it to happen, and yet you planned a weekend getaway with him? You're telling me you didn't mean for this?" She winced, the truth of my words hitting her harder than I expected. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't ready to feel sorry for her. Not yet. Not when the pain in my chest was so raw. I thought I could handle it. I thought it was just something small, something I could control, she stammered, her voice breaking with each word. But it wasn't. I got too caught up in it, Jason. I don't know what happened. I made a mistake, a huge mistake. Please, I'm so sorry. I took a step back, running a hand through my hair, trying to process everything she had just said. The betrayal was deeper than I could have imagined. She had convinced herself it wasn't real, that she could compartmentalize it. But here I was, with the evidence, with the painful reality of everything she had kept from me. Do you even understand what you've done? I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. I trusted you, Olivia. I trusted you completely. And now I find out that all of it, the love, the years, the family, is nothing but a lie. A game to you. She began to cry openly now, her shoulders shaking with the weight of what she had done. I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted this, Jason, I swear, but it happened and I can't take it back. My mind was racing. I couldn't understand. How could she say she didn't want to hurt me, yet go behind my back like this? How could she live with herself knowing the pain she was causing me? I don't even know who you are anymore, I whispered, more to myself than to her. I don't know the woman I've been living with all this time. Olivia collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I could hear her sobbing quietly, but it wasn't enough. The damage was done. No apology would fix this. I stood there, staring at her, the words I wanted to say caught in my throat. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if I could forgive her or if I even wanted to. I need time, Olivia, I said finally, my voice hoarse. I need time to figure this out. I don't know if I can do this anymore. The silence between us had stretched longer than I could stand. Olivia was still crying, her face buried in her hands as if she could block out the reality of what she had done. The weight of the moment settled heavily around us. It was suffocating, the air thick with unspoken words and the crushing truth of betrayal. I couldn't look at her without seeing the woman I thought I knew, but also someone entirely different, a stranger who had chosen to walk away from everything we had. I wanted to scream, to demand every last piece of honesty from her, but something inside me stopped. Maybe it was the way she had fallen apart, so raw, so vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. Or maybe it was the exhaustion that had built up inside me over days of doubt, suspicion, and now the confirmation of my worst fears. Jason, she said, her voice trembling with a desperation I hadn't heard before. I know I've broken you. I know I've betrayed you in the worst way possible, but please just let me explain. Her voice cracked, and it was almost too much to bear. I stood there, frozen, caught between the part of me that still wanted to believe in her and the part of me that felt like I had lost everything. I didn't know if I wanted to hear her explanation or if I just wanted the whole nightmare to end. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and then I spoke, though the words felt foreign in my mouth. I don't know if there's anything left to explain, Olivia. You've already told me everything I need to know. This isn't a mistake you can just explain away. She lifted her tear-streaked face, looking at me with eyes full of regret. Please don't say that. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never meant for it to go this far. It started so small, and I told myself it wasn't real. I told myself I could handle it, but I couldn't. I lost myself, Jason. Her words hit me harder than anything else, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of the woman I once knew, but it was fleeting, gone almost as soon as it came. The damage was done, and no words could undo the hurt she had caused. You lost yourself, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. You lost yourself in someone else, in another man? How could you do this? How could you look me in the eye every day and pretend like nothing was wrong? I don't know, she sobbed. I don't have an excuse. There's nothing I can say to make it right. All I can do is tell you the truth, and I've been hiding it from you for so long. Because I was scared. Scared of what it would mean for us. Scared of what you would think of me. I felt a coldness settling in my chest. I had wanted her to be honest, to tell me the truth, but now that she had, I wasn't sure I could handle it. The raw honesty in her words was almost too much, too painful. It wasn't just the betrayal of her actions. It was the betrayal of her hiding this from me for so long. It was the emotional distance that had grown between us, an invisible wall she had built brick by brick, each secret a stone that added to the distance. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Olivia," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't even know who you are anymore. I thought I knew you. I thought we had something real. But now all I see is someone who chose to tear us apart." She reached out, her hands trembling as she tried to touch my arm, but I pulled away. I couldn't let her touch me, not now, not when the trust had been shattered beyond repair. "Jason, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "I never meant to hurt you. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I am so sorry. I know I can't take back what I've done, but please believe me when I say that I never stopped loving you." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to block out the sound of her voice, but it was impossible. The words she said, the tears she shed, they didn't change what had happened. They didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me, that she had shared a part of herself with someone else. I couldn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. My mind was spinning, flooded with memories of everything we had built together, our wedding, the birth of our children, the life we had shared. And now it was all tainted. I felt like I was drowning in the weight of it. "I don't know what to do, Olivia," I finally whispered, the weight of my own sorrow breaking through. "I don't know how to move forward from this." Her face crumpled as she cried harder. "I don't know either," she said, her voice a broken whisper. "I've lost everything, Jason, and it's my fault." We stood there facing each other, the gulf between us wider than it had ever been. The truth had come out, but it had done nothing to heal the wound. There was no magic in her confession, no way to take back the hurt she had caused. It had all been said. Now it was just a matter of how we would live with the aftermath. I didn't know if we could rebuild what had been broken, or if I even wanted to try. But one thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The days after Olivia's confession were like a haze, a blur of pain and disbelief. I found myself waking up every morning lying next to her and wondering how we had come to this. She was still in the house, still trying to be the wife she thought I needed, but I couldn't see her the same way anymore. The trust that had once been the foundation of our marriage was gone, replaced by an unsettling emptiness that clung to every room. I couldn't move forward without answers, without clarity. But I also knew that I couldn't keep pretending that things were fine. I needed to make a decision, whether to try and fix this or to let go of something that had become irreparably broken. I made an appointment with a lawyer. It was a small step, one I never thought I'd have to take. But here I was, sitting in a sterile office with a legal professional, discussing the next steps in what was fast becoming a painful reality. The lawyer, a woman in her mid-40s with a no-nonsense attitude, listened quietly as I explained the situation. She didn't judge, didn't offer sympathy. She simply asked questions and laid out the facts. "Your primary concern, Jason, should be your financial well-being and your children's stability," she said, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. "Given the situation, you have every right to file for divorce, but there are options to consider before making that decision." Her words struck me like a cold splash of water. Divorce. It seemed too final, too definitive. But at the same time, the thought of living this way, trapped in a marriage that no longer felt like mine, was unbearable. The lawyer spoke about separation as an option. A temporary separation, she explained, could give me space to clear my mind, to decide what I truly wanted without the immediate pressure of making a decision. But even as she spoke, I could feel the weight of the choice pressing on me. What did I want? Could I forgive her? Could I live with the woman who had betrayed me so completely? "Separation can be a good option for some couples," she continued. "It doesn't mean you're giving up, but it allows you both time to breathe. You'll have to work through the details like custody arrangements, living situations, and division of assets, but it might give you the clarity you need." I nodded, but inside I felt nothing but confusion. I didn't want a separation, not really. I wanted to believe that we could heal, that we could rebuild. But every time I thought about Olivia's actions, the picture of her with him, the lies she had told me, It felt impossible. When the meeting ended, I left the office with 1,000 thoughts swirling in my head. I drove aimlessly, not knowing where I was going, not knowing what I was looking for. The only thing I knew was that I couldn't make any decisions in a rush. I had to consider everything: our marriage, my children, my future. Later that night, Olivia tried to talk to me again. She wanted to explain, wanted to apologize once more. But I couldn't bear it. I couldn't sit there and listen to her speak like nothing had changed. Everything had changed. She had changed. And no matter how many times she said she was sorry, the truth was that it would never be enough. I looked at her then, her eyes pleading, and I felt a pang of guilt. I had loved her once, truly, deeply, but that love was buried now, suffocated by the betrayal, by the choices she had made. "I've been to see a lawyer," I said, my voice low. It was the first time I'd spoken about it out loud, and it felt like a confession in itself. Her face drained of color. "What? You're serious?" I nodded, the finality of the words hanging in the air between us. "I don't know what's next, Olivia. I don't know if I can even keep living like this." She looked down, her shoulders slumping. For the first time since this whole thing started, I saw her broken, completely defeated. She didn't try to argue. She didn't try to justify herself. She simply sat there, staring at the floor, as if the weight of what she had done had finally settled on her. "I'll leave if that's what you want," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I felt the sting of that sentence deep in my chest. The idea of her leaving, of ending this whole life we had built, felt like a nightmare. But at the same time, it seemed like the only way forward. "I don't know what I want," I whispered, barely able to speak the words. "I just know I can't keep living like this. I need time." I saw her fighting to hold back tears, but she couldn't. The floodgates opened and she cried in silence, her shoulders shaking with the weight of everything she had done. I left her there, unsure of what the future held. But one thing was clear. Whatever decision I made, it would shape the rest of our lives. And I didn't know if I was ready for that. The days after the separation began to feel like an endless cycle of half-hearted attempts at normalcy. Olivia and I had reached an uneasy truce, our daily conversations revolving solely around the kids, the logistics of co-parenting. The love that had once defined our relationship was now buried under the weight of betrayal. But despite everything, there was a part of me that knew we couldn't fall apart completely. We had children, and they were the only thing that remained untouched by the wreckage of our marriage. Co-parenting became the new reality we were forced to navigate. Every conversation with Olivia felt like we were playing a part, pretending to be the parents our children deserved while avoiding the painful truths that loomed between us. I'd always thought that once the emotional turmoil passed, things would fall into place, that the healing would come naturally. But it didn't. The silence that stretched between us was deafening, even when we talked about the kids. I spent hours each day trying to focus on my work, trying to regain the sense of purpose I had once found in my career. But every time I came home, the house felt colder, emptier. The absence of the life we once had together echoed in every corner. I couldn't escape the nagging thoughts that consumed me. Had I made the right choice in staying? Could I have tried harder to rebuild what we had? The guilt weighed on me. I had to admit that I wasn't the same person anymore. I had changed. The part of me that believed in unconditional love and forgiveness was now gone, replaced by a person who didn't know if he could ever trust again. The children, Noah and Emma, seemed to adapt better than I expected. They were confused, of course, but they didn't have the same emotional weight that I carried. They still wanted both of us, still looked at us with the hope that we could be the parents they had always known. That hope made me feel like a failure every time I saw their innocent eyes. Olivia and I tried to maintain a united front in front of them. We attended their school events, took them to their sports games, and had dinner together when we could. It was like we were actors in a play pretending to be a family when, in reality, we were just two people stuck in the aftermath of something broken. The hardest part, however, was confronting myself. After the emotional fallout of everything that had happened, I found myself questioning everything I had believed about love, trust, and commitment. Was I really capable of loving her again? Would I ever feel the same about her as I once did? I started going to therapy, At first, it was more for the kids than for me. I thought it would help them cope, help them understand what had happened between their mother and me. But over time, I realized I was doing this for myself. I had to unpack the wreckage of my own soul to understand why I had allowed myself to be blind to the cracks in our marriage for so long. Why hadn't I seen the signs sooner? Why had I ignored the whispers in my gut that told me something was off? The sessions were difficult, often bringing up feelings I wasn't ready to face. But through the pain, I began to see things differently. I had allowed myself to be consumed by guilt, anger, and confusion. But there was also a part of me that wanted to heal, that wanted to forgive, not just Olivia, but myself. Some days I found myself longing for the days when everything had been simple, when we had shared a vision of our future together. But I knew that couldn't be the reality anymore. I wasn't the same person, and neither was she. The love we had shared had changed, and it was something we both had to come to terms with. Olivia and I had a few conversations in the weeks that followed, each one more difficult than the last. We spoke less about the past and more about our children, how they were adjusting, how we could make the situation as smooth as possible for them. But each time I looked at her, I saw the woman who had betrayed me, and I couldn't help but wonder if we would ever be able to move past it. The healing didn't happen overnight. It wasn't something I could force or rush. Every small step felt like progress, but there were days when it felt like we were taking 2 steps back. I had to face the reality that I couldn't change what had happened. All I could do was move forward, one day at a time, with the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find peace in the chaos. Eventually, I started to feel a flicker of hope. It wasn't the same kind of hope I once had for our marriage, but it was something. It was the hope that I could build a life for myself again, outside of the shadow of betrayal, that I could find happiness without constantly looking back. Olivia and I continued to co-parent, doing our best to support our children and provide them with stability. But I knew deep down that we were never going to go back to what we had before. We could never go back to the way things were, and that was okay. Because sometimes letting go is the only way to heal. What do you think of Jason and Olivia's story? From which region are you watching this video? Your support means a lot. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to follow all our stories. And don't forget to check out more heartwarming tales by clicking here on the end screen.